Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Minds Unbound. Today, we're here with you. We have Sophia and Yondra, and we are talking about a controversial but much needed topic, and that is weather modification and direct energy weapons, and whether or not these things are being used. And if they are, how frequently are they being used and to what extent? And then what are the consequences, the intended and unintended consequences of these types of technologies being used? And even more importantly, we want to touch on whether or not the public should be made aware of these types of methodologies being deployed and to what extent that they should be made aware. Just we're looking to have the conversation. We're not looking to steer anyone in one particular direction or another, but we have uncovered a lot of very interesting information, specifically regarding the types of technologies that are even being tracked and publicly recorded and regulated on the NOAA website itself. And we're a little shocked that it's not being discussed more now than it is. So we want to just kind of dive into that and have this conversation, not necessarily saying yes, whether modification is being used or only used, and not saying either that it's not. We want to just talk about it openly and get your thoughts and hear your questions and see what your experiences have been. We're very interested in that this week. Both of us have discussed this quite a bit, and we too aren't really sure where we stand on this, but it is a very interesting topic. And Sophia, if you could touch on maybe some of the uses that we do know about in the past. I think you had talked about one of them named Popeye, something like that. But if
Yeah,
you could give us a little summary on some of that.
yeah. So Operation Popeye actually was used during the Vietnam War. Actually, they used certain cloud seeding, technologies and things like that in order to make it rain. Most of the time during the Vietnam War, and several other things that they used, in which we had already touched base on, other things that they had used during the Vietnam War, like different psyops and things like that, in order to keep them scared and things like that. Some other things, though, that I found, was like, so they had Project Skyfire, which is actually, it was like a lightning suppression. And basically, the U.S. Forest Service actually, they, weirdly enough, um, they use cloud seedings and stuff like that, in order to alter like cloud to lightning, from lightning, from the thunder clouds and things like that. Um, Another one is like Project Storm Fury. This was like to do with tornadoes and hurricanes, where they, there were several attempts that were made, to like modify hurricanes actually by using certain cloud seeding things, because of what they were trying to do was, they were focusing on the outer zone of like the eye wall of the hurricane, and they would release like extreme amounts of silver iodine and things like that into the, trying to release it into the eye wall. Now this went on from the 1962 until 1983, because they were basically, what they were trying to do was to weaken the hurricanes, by using this, this silver iodine and releasing it. But it was unsuccessful, in modifying hurricanes, because of the fact that there was not enough of silver iodine on the planet in order to be able to have enough to do that with, so it basically, that was a perfect demonstration that, that human manipulation of hurricanes was not yet possible at that time period. And as we know, from volunteers and stuff, we hear it all the time when we, post videos about the climate and things like that, which, because we have to monitor all of these climate events and stuff. And the one thing that we hear all the time is, oh well, it's HARP, and oh well, it's this, and oh well, it's that. Well, that's I don't really feel like that it's necessarily that that's the case because of the fact that, well, I mean, like, we've had talked before the show and everything else, and so when we know how much everything takes to generate, and so that's why I hope with by this episode, it's not to we're not here to say that we 100% agree that they are or aren't. We do know that in the past that they have used different. I mean, because that clearly shows right there, that they have used several things in the past, and they're still using things today. But are they the root cause for what's going on? Or is it due to something else, like like the 12,000 year cycle?
Right. Well, and then also, I think it raises an important question too, because one of the things that you found was a list of all of the modification that has even taken place just in 2024, and we've learned that the National Oceanic Association is actually responsible for regulating and tracking all weather modification uh, uses and deployments within our country. And you would also learn that there's legislation and policies surrounding all of these things that make it to where it is permissible to be used in the country of origin, but then not able to be used across enemy lines, which I found that to be very interesting. So that tells us again that it is being used. We don't know to what extent it's being used unless we're regularly tracking it, but the mainstream isn't reporting this to us. And when we've looked in here, they're using things like enhancing snowpack and rainfall in areas where there's droughts. And it looks like, for the most part, their intention is to do good with these types of influences. However, there are upstream and downstream consequences. And the public at large isn't even aware of this. That we're typically told that, you're wearing a tinfoil hat if you even talk about weather modification being used. And it's almost immediately silenced and hushed. And there's just not a lot of dialogue going on around about this. You either condemn somebody for being a cuckoo if they start talking about it, and as we've come to learn, the majority of things that are circulating, they do have some truth in it. And it's, we have to really discern which aspects of this are feasible and which are just complete, not reality. And so that's kind of what we were trying to take a look at with this. And there is a ton. I mean, just the screenshots that you've sent me: snowpack augmentation, increasing snowpack, rain enhancement, marine boundary layers, increasing precipitation. All these events happen between 2023 and 2024. And this is just all on, NOAA's website. So you can go and look at this for yourself. But it's not telling us what were the results, what was the outcome, and then what was the results and the outcome around the surrounding areas of that. Because if you take precipitation from one area and redirect it to another area, there are going to be consequences. Maybe a crop isn't going to grow in another area because of that, or there's going to see, further droughts because of that, because, there's such a complex system at play on our entire planet. And we're not being made aware of this. Now, we did look into the capacity of what these weapons are capable of doing, and at least what is being disclosed as far as what they're capable of doing. We wanted to look at Lahaina fires and what the root cause of that was. There's been a lot of speculation as far as, was this, directed energy weapons, or was this HARP, or was this cloud seeding, or like you said, I mean, they can direct lightning too. I mean, they could have even used potentially lightning to start a fire. And,
Exactly.
you want to maybe talk a little bit about what we discovered with Lahaina, and as far as their emergency plans being changed in the same year that this tragedy occurred, before the tragedy occurred, which is unusual,
Yeah, very unusual. Yeah, and that was like for like I said, I had a friend. She actually had family that was in Lahaina whenever it happened. She actually was living in Alaska whenever the fires happened, but she did like I said, she had family that lived there. And she had talked to them about it and stuff. I do, and I remembered. I followed the whole thing. That was happening there with Lahaina. Very closely and stuff. Because I was trying to figure out. Oh well, did they, was it caused by these things, because I had heard all the stories that was going around, TikTok and stuff. So I started doing my own research and stuff, you know, and they did, they're, there you can go and you can download the PDFs right off of their website, and it will actually tell you, right there, what each, emergency preparedness plan is and things like that. Where and it shows that it was changed, in 2023, and it was changed before the actual fires. The fact that they didn't sound the alarms whenever the fires had happened. I know my friend, her aunt, her aunt and uncle is the ones that still live there. They told her, they did not sound the sirens. They didn't even sound the hurricane sirens. I mean, and there was countless people, video footage, of people being redirected to go back into Lahaina when they were trying to get out. Why did the police, redirect them back into where the fires were that they knew, and there was all these different speculations. We do know, they said that, it was electrical due to downed power lines because of the high winds, and that knocked the power lines down, and the power lines struck, got caught fire when they hit the ground. Well, then when you go and you look at who actually owns big portions of the electric place, I'm not going to name names, but I'll just tell you it's two of the main people that own everything in our world. So that
Yeah,
should tell you something, but I'm not going to say who it is. So, but I mean, that kind of has to make you wonder, and then all these people, there was even, I had seen on certain videos where they actually said that China actually had satellites over Lahaina right before this happened. I mean, all of this is where all of these, stories end up, generating into these, oh, well, it's this and it's that. I mean, okay, if you want the public to not be suspicious of the things you're doing, then stop doing the suspicious shit. You know what I mean? It's like, why, but, I think you have to really look at the fact, instead of doing part of the research, I think that people need to do like real entire, the whole research. I mean, it doesn't take 5 seconds to go and look up and see. We did it. I mean, because we're going to give you these numbers here in a minute and show to you, um, you know, what a category 5 hurricane takes to generate and what HARP generates and all these. So we're going to break that down for you in a minute and show you all about that, and if we can do it, so can everybody else. But yeah, they had
absolutely.
definitely changed the emergency preparedness plans to they changed it to where in the event of like major disasters, the people that would not have the money to be able to like to rebuild or pay to get for the damages and everything, that land would basically, it was like basically a land grab, where if you can't, and even we read in that one emergency preparedness plan, that's why that the government and stuff like that, that's why they will put FEMA in place whenever a major disaster happens. Oh, well, what do? They file a state of emergency. Why? Because that puts FEMA in place and that puts them in charge. Then they get to decide who gets what resources that are available. And if they decide, oh, well, your town is too poor before this, then they don't necessarily they'll deny most of the claims, and they really do. I mean, I have a girl, she had damages from Ian in Florida, and she is still waiting on her claims from Ian to be approved by FEMA, and she had her FEMA thing set up, her appointment. They rescheduled her appointment from Milton. She lost her car, by the way. Her car was flooded. She lost her car completely, yes, and her whole lower part of her house was flooded. They rescheduled her appointment, right? But then told her that they would have to redo her claim because she missed her appointment. But they're the ones that called and rescheduled it. So they're just trying to F her around, you know. I mean, that's exactly what they're doing. And that's what I told her. I
Hmm.
said, they're just trying to screw you around. I mean, because if you've been waiting since Ian to get payment and you haven't, and now here you go, you know, you're still waiting. I mean, that, you know, not only that, but get this, then they give her emergency food stamps, right? For Milton, and you know, because all their food was lost. So over $1,200 worth of food stamps. She had seen, she went, called, and it was on the card. She went to the store, and the time it took her to get her a basket full of groceries, every dime was taken off of it by someone that had used them in New York. She's in Florida, and somebody in New York used them. They were all gone, and then they tell her it was a glitch, but she'll have to wait 6 months to get them reinstated.
Oh, wow.
So it's deliberately fucking people over. I mean, I'm sorry, excuse my language, but that's exactly what it's doing. They are deliberately screwing these people. And I mean, and it's just, you
Nobody
know,
knows. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
the rest of the public has no idea. So then when this comes for
Yeah.
me and you and them and whoever's
Mm-hmm.
listening to this, it's going to be the same smoke and mirrors. It's going
Mm-hmm.
to be the same runaround.
Especially if you live in a poor town, a town that's poor, you know, ahead of time. I mean, look at Asheville, North Carolina. You know, it was not a very wealthy town before. And then now look at it, and
Well, the
those people
reality
aren't going to have
also
money.
is that we know because of what's coming with the cycle that they're all going to be poor. It's just going to
Mm-hmm.
be when they become the poor town, right? So all the towns are
Yeah.
going downhill. But I also thought one of the
Yeah.
interesting thing is too that we touched on, because a lot of people will search, you know, to do their research, and they'll find, if you just do a surface level search, that the National Oceanic Association, it says no, they're not involved in weather modification. They don't participate in weather modification. Well, that's a really easy out for them, because if you dive a little bit deeper, you'll just find that it's not them. They're subcontracting it out to other companies that are conducting the weather modification operations. And so I got
Mm-hmm.
even, and I'll just list a few of them for our listeners, but there are a number of contractors that work for the government, and they're regulating, supposedly NOAA is regulating them, tracking this, making sure they're within compliance. We didn't even know that this was happening on such a massive scale, that it's basically a corporation is what it sounds like. So we have Weather Modification Inc., which is WMI. They're located in Fargo, North Dakota. They use cloud seeding for on ground-based generators or aircraft to enhance precipitation, suppress hail, and dissipate fog. So that opens up
Wow.
questions like, if a concert is canceled, was that intentional? Who should be responsible for
Mm-hmm.
reimbursing the people who bought the tickets to that, you know? Government. So we also have the North American Weather Consultants. They're located in Sandy, Utah. Again, they use cloud seeding, precipitation enhancement, hail suppression, snowpack augmentation. They work for the Western United States. They work for water districts. They work for ski resorts. I mean, so that's sort of typical and to be expected. But then there's others like SOAR, which is the seeding operations and atmospheric research from Wichita, Kansas. They also participate in cloud seeding, atmospheric research, real-time weather analysis. I mean, those are just a few. There's one in Nevada, United States. There's snowy hydro in Australia, advanced environmental monitoring. I mean, there's China Aerospace Science and Technology. So there's a lot of them here,
That's
and
in the U.S.
they're a contractor for the US, and NOAA is tracking them.
Okay.
So that means
Wow.
they fall under their umbrella, which is pretty wild. Even Russia,
Mm-hmm.
Russian Federal Hydrometeorology and Environmental Monitoring Service. This is based in Russia, but NOAA tracks them too. Cloud seeding to reduce
Really?
rainfall before national celebrations. They used it even for the Olympics. So, I mean, that raises questions like, why did they get to have their weather perfected, but we don't? And why was our event canceled, but
Mm-hmm.
theirs was allowed to go? I mean, it raises a whole lot of
True.
questions outside of even life and death situations. Like, nobody's even aware of this stuff. I don't think.
Yeah. And see, and also too, I was going to tell you, see, I'm glad you brought that up about, you know, Russia, is because I actually had wrote down at the top of that paper, you know, about the Project Sky Fury and things like that. But before that, I had wrote up at the very top of it, hail suppression was actually used. These was reports from the Soviet scientists introduced like seeding nuclei at the optimum position and time by using aircraft shells, and that they were successful, and that the U.S. National Science Foundation made plans to initiate their own program from this.
Oh, really?
Now
Oh,
this was back in
interesting.
the yeah this was back in the Soviet scientists, when Soviet, I guess during the Soviet Union days, so
So
because it
we're
says Soviet
probably,
scientist.
it's probably just widespread everywhere by now because, I mean,
Yeah.
in the land of technology, 1 year is like 10 years for technology.
Hmm.
So it just goes
Yeah. And
so far in advance. It grows
yeah.
exponentially.
And
What were
see,
you
and we do know that, in Dubai, their own government said, that they actually had used cloud seeding, and that they just didn't anticipate that it was going to produce that much, rain. And then look, I mean, Dubai ended up getting like major flooded,
Yeah, so then why
like the
doesn't that
whole,
leave the citizens that are impacted by these situations an opportunity to get compensated from the government directly, since the government can't say with any definitiveness that the damages weren't because of their meddling in one
yeah.
form, facet, or another. Even though, like we did, so here's the scope of cloud seeding. This is what is published anyway. So, cloud seeding doesn't drastically alter natural precipitation levels. It typically increases rainfall by a modest 10 to 15% under favorable conditions. However, it's highly unlikely to create extreme rainfall events capable of causing flooding. But I would wonder if that takes into account this cycle, because as we know, with the micro and nanoplastics in the atmosphere, maybe they using data from before we entered the cycle, it would have only produced 10 to 15% more rain, right? But now, because of the
Hmm.
nanoplastics and the cosmic energy, we have more water in the air. So when they're
Wow.
intervening, thinking it's going to do what it did during all their studies, it's not,
Hmm.
because it's
Hmm.
a whole new world now. It's a whole new world. It's a whole
Yeah.
new landscape of, like, it's all grown by orders of magnitude. And now there's going to be so much more water, where before it was 10 to 15%. Maybe now it's 30, 35, 40%. And maybe they're
I
saying,
agree.
we don't even know about them using it. So how do we know?
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I agree 100%. Yeah. I think that that's actually, that could be very, true, is that they are, they're not taking into consideration, and then not only that, but we're actually going through, we're not just in the regular 12,000 year cycle, we're actually in the, we're going through the 24,000 year cycle, which means it's going to be even doubled amplified, for us, than what it, has been, than what it was the previous cycle.
Right. And so then it brings questions up, like, if they're still using these things, because all these private companies, they don't even know about the cycle, most likely, just like 99% of the population. They could be unintentionally creating a ton of harm, or it could
Yeah.
be intentional. It could be intentional, but I prefer to believe that most humans are good. We'll do what we can get away with, but we aren't trying to hurt anyone for the most part. We're just, most of us don't want anyone to hurt us, and we don't want to hurt anyone else. Most
Right.
of us. There's the weirdos, the rare people, the one-offs, but I think the majority of us are trying to
Yeah.
make the world a better place.
That's
Let's
true.
see. Yeah, so since 1950, they've actually been tracking weather modification. Since 1950, NOAA's
Hmm.
been tracking this.
Yeah.
They don't, they, it's almost like the covert and clandestine conversations we'd had before, where they find a way to keep themselves from being directly implicated, because they subcontract this out to all those other no-name companies that just operate off of three letters.
Which kind of makes you wonder, well, are these just covert operations, or
Yeah,
I
it brings
mean,
up a lot of
because I
questions.
mean that would be my definition. I mean, because we have already, went over it, and we know that that's what, covert, operations is basically like, where it's not a paper trail leading back to your own government, but rather than others. But even though we do know that it does state, I believe that it was in the Beijing, yeah, I want to say it was in that Beijing, PDF that I had sent you, the one that it was talking about that's where it was talking about actually, about the Oh, about where they could only do it to that particular, they could only do it to their own country. They couldn't use it like, because see, if you use it, even, and I do know that there's a thing with the UN that even says that, you can't use it like for other countries. You can't, like, so US can't use it against Russia, even though, which doesn't make sense, because what part of Vietnam, now, did they just change that or what? Because we do know that the US did use it in Vietnam.
Well, yeah, but we have also found too that like direct energy weapons and stuff are allowed to be used by the military. So for their military operations, it seems like it falls under a different scope of
It
what's
may do,
permissible and not
yeah.
permissible. So if it's in during wartime, they probably anything goes, right? They're not doing anything legal during wartime. They're going out and
True.
murdering everyone. So, you know, they're
Yeah,
not
that's
doing good
true.
things. They're doing bad things. So
That's true.
it's not like they're going to be like, oh, you guys didn't want us to do terrible things to you. Okay, we didn't know that. We'll stop now. No,
Yeah,
that's their,
right.
that's their actual goal. So we were looking at too, a lot of people have questions as to whether or not these hurricanes are being generated by or even manipulated or steered by the capacity to manipulate the weather, such as the direct energy weapons, the cloud seeding, um, HARP, things like that, because these are reoccurring statements that are coming up out of the woodwork. So we want to take a look at it and
Hmm.
talk about it. Could it be causing these massive hurricanes that are going through
Yeah.
rapid intensification? So you
Hmm.
can share yours. I'll share the one that I looked up. It was
Hmm.
about the direct energy weapons and such as
Right.
high energy lasers. It says actually that these can produce 100 megawatts of power, which is a lot. However,
Hmm.
this is significantly less than the energy released by a nuclear bomb. For example, a 1 megaton nuclear weapon releases energy equivalent to, now I hadn't heard this term before, so this is new for me, but it's
Hmm.
4.18 petajoules or 4.18 million gigajoules or about 1 million tons of TNT. So, in comparison, 100 megawatts from the directed energy weapon is equivalent to only 0.36 gigajoules. And we need 4.18 million gigajoules to be able to accomplish that. So it's 0.36 of the 4.18 million that we need. So huge disparity between what we would actually need to
Hmm.
maintain a category 5 hurricane. It's not even
Yeah.
like that's like just fantasy stuff right
Nowhere
now.
close.
So the energy output of a directed energy weapon is vastly smaller than that of a nuclear explosion, and nuclear explosions matter because, as Sophia had looked up, there's a specific amount of nuclear explosions that you need to sustain a category 5 hurricane.
Yeah, and that's like 200, try 200, that's 200 nuclear bombs is about the equivalent of what a category 5 hurricane produces, actually. And so, and for all of you that are going to say, oh no, it's HARP. No, well, here's the statistics, here's the numbers for HARP. So HARP only generates, oh, and my, let me just say this first. So HARP hasn't even been online for like over 3 years, just to throw that out there. So I don't know how it can be producing anything when it's not even been online for 3 years. But okay, but when it was online, 3 years ago, it actually produced 3.6 megawatts of energy. And like I said, a category 5 hurricane, it takes 200 nuclear bombs. That's how much energy it takes to generate per day. And so also, so as far as like a EF5 tornado, that takes 10,000 kilowatts, as to where the direct energy weapons takes 1 kilowatt. So
Wow.
that's like
Yeah.
9,999 more
Sure.
kilowatts are needed for it to be able to produce it. So like neither one of those, and that's, again, it takes, and beside, and just so you know, megawatts is, it's, it is definitely, less than the kilowatts. Um, so yeah, it cannot produce, neither one of them can produce. Um, so far, they can't produce hurricanes, or not the strongest hurricanes or tornadoes that we have. Um, to my knowledge, I don't really believe that they would be able to produce any, even a EF1 or even a Category 1. I still don't think it would be generate enough of power. I mean, I just don't see how it would be able to.
Right. Well, and just to give our listeners an idea about the massive scale of a hurricane, an average hurricane, we looked into that too. And the energy released by an average hurricane through cloud and rain formation, just naturally, is actually the equivalent of 200 times the world's total electrical generating capacity. 200
Mm-hmm.
times the whole world, not just America, not just Russia, not just China, not just Japan, the whole world. And not just the
Mm-hmm.
whole world, 200 of them, 200 of the whole
Yeah.
world to generate
Yeah.
enough energy to sustain a Category 5 hurricane. So
Yeah.
that's massive. Like, that's almost incomprehensible for me because
That
our
is.
planet is so
It's
big, so
insane.
freaking big. Yeah. I mean, I've driven coast to coast in the United States and that took 3 days. So it's a whole world,
Mm-hmm.
200 of the whole world. That's wild to me. I mean,
It
that's
is.
that,
Yeah,
those
that
hurricanes.
blew my mind. Actually, it did.
Yeah. I'm like, wow. But that's good to hear for us to try to imagine that, and to give us an idea of
Yeah.
just where we are and where nature is at. So it
Yeah.
sort of puts us in our
Yeah,
place.
because people will all the time say that they're like, it's man made, it's all this is man. Well, I mean, I know what, people have to also, people really have to use their, I mean, just like how, like, we said, all of these things it's not like it's hidden knowledge. It's kept, you can literally go on the NOAA website and it shows you where, just go and look it up and it shows you all the reports. You can even click the part of the link, or part of the links are actually blue. Those are actually where you can click on it and it will tell you all about that particular report. You can look at every one of them. It only took me up to till October the 31st of this year, but that's probably just because they haven't updated the website, yet, because we're still, we're just in mid-November. So they probably do it, like every so often. But I mean, it did go all the way back to like what it was like November of last year. It
Mm-hmm.
was where it had started basically. So it was all the way back to last year. So, it's so, and there was like what, I think whenever I clicked on it to get the things, it said it was like 75 or 100 pages or something like that. So there was
Yeah.
100 of those reports there. So, and it listed every one of them. It's not like, I mean, now are we saying that they, but we do know that it does state, and it even tells you right there on their website that they have to, it is a federal law that they have to they have to make a report every time they're going to use anything like that. So, and they
Mm-hmm.
do have it listed on there. So it's not like it's a lie or anything like that. I mean, it's right there as
It's
proof.
all there.
I
Yeah. And the
mean,
scope of the
mhm.
projects are pretty lengthy too. I noticed some of them, or most of them, they're not just like we're using cloud seeding for these 2 days. They're like from January until April, we were cloud seeding. So they're like multiple months.
Mhm.
Those are some massive, massive projects. So I wonder who's paying for those. I guess the
Well, see,
government.
and yeah, because it does tell you, it says like, so it says you have those over here, it says that's the project designation. So we know, like, okay, so whatever these different, I guess you would have to look up the different companies. I know that one of these says, okay, um, well, like this one right here, it says SAWPA Weather Modification Program. So you would just have to probably go and look at that particular weather modification program. But I mean, like that one right there, it goes from 11/15/23 till April 15th of 24. So that's, like you said, that's several months.
Yeah, that's a
And
long
that one
time.
right there was for, I'm not sure what that one was for, increased precipitation. So I
Right.
mean,
Right.
but if
Well,
that place is someplace like, say, in the middle of the desert, like Arizona or something, I mean, is that necessarily a bad thing? I mean, it's just increasing the precipitation.
Right.
I mean,
It's fine when when it works out, but it's not so fine when it doesn't. What if when it leaves
yeah.
people stranded in a place and they're
Hmm.
trapped in floods and they maybe lose their life or, contract
Yeah.
diseases or famine or whatever, because these things are
Yeah.
being used. And as our environment
Right.
becomes even more extreme and more chaotic, these things are going to be much more difficult for them to even manage and keep control of, because
Yeah.
if we're going up there and seeding these atmospheric rivers, that's going to have a very
Yep.
different output than if they're just thinking they're seeding a cloud. And
Yeah.
if the companies out there aren't even aware of what the conditions are of what they're dealing with,
About the
because
yeah.
about really, how fast it's going to escalate and how much it's going to deteriorate and become even more chaotic and more severe and more spontaneous. I mean, the general public
Yeah.
needs to be aware of this too. We all need to know about
Hmm.
this, because that could come into play with our own lives too. So now we're dealing with not only what nature's going to be throwing at us in the 24,000 year cycle, which is the worst possible, and the
Yeah.
nanoplastics, but then we also have all these companies profiting off of manipulating the weather to their own advantage.
Right.
I
And
also
see, and I
wanted to,
think that that's a big deal too, is that
yeah,
because they don't, for the most part, I mean, I know that, the Creative Society, they have, tried to present, this to the government, and show, hey, but they keep getting kind of, shunned
silent,
or whatever, like, no. And so, and I think, but I mean, they do know about it. They are well aware of it. I do know that the leaders do know about it, they've known about it since like 1998. But I mean, still, if they are, I mean, if they know that they are increasing already, like why would you even use anything if you already know that it's already increasing? Like, why mess with it, because it's like, did they cause that huge flooding in California earlier this year? Did they, are they causing most of the flooding that's going on around the world? I mean, some of these countries are just plumb underwater, I mean, look at China right now.
right, right.
I
Well, and
mean,
also,
and if they are, they need to, everybody needs to be aware of it, rather than just kind of ignoring like that it's not happening.
right. Yeah, and we should be made aware of what's going to be used before it's even used and what the upstream and
Yeah.
downstream consequences of that are going to be. If you suppress the hail from falling on this city, what is going to be the result of that? When it continues to travel, that weather system is going to continue, and it didn't release that energy, because this is all just about the transference of energy. So, it can't be created or destroyed. It has to be transformed or transmuted
Hmm.
or redirected. So we're not being given that information, and our lives are being definitely impacted in however
Yeah.
this is being used. I did get some information too I wanted to share about the directed energy weapons, such as the high energy lasers. These typically generate power outputs measured in kilowatts or megawatts. For example, high energy lasers can produce a power output of at least 1 kilowatt, and they're capable of melting steel. So we know that. However, the total energy output of these weapons over time is far less than the energy released by a hurricane. A Category 5 hurricane can release the equivalent energy of several terajoules per second. Terajoules, which we looked all those too, which is orders of magnitude greater than the current DEWs, or directed energy weapons, can produce. So that tells us that too. But I know that one of the
Hmm.
biggest questions that we have is, is it able to influence the rapid intensification that we see happening so much more frequently now than we've seen before? We know that the cycle is largely contributing to this, but the question is also, are those unintended consequences or intended consequences also contributing to the issue? Are they escalating or exacerbating it? Are they being used, and could this be influencing how they're rapidly intensifying? Or even, like we were saying, redirecting them. Could it be possible that by protecting larger populations like we saw in Tampa Bay, where Milton looked like it was going to be a direct hit until these magical
Hmm.
shear winds appeared out of nowhere off the coast of Tampa Bay and redirected that storm someplace else? Thank God for Tampa Bay, but not for anybody else who wasn't spared. So how,
Yeah.
I mean, that's not valuing human life equally, for sure. every human
Hmm.
life matters
And then,
equally.
and
So,
they said, yeah, and then some people even said that in Deer and Helene, that it was actually, it was redirected from Tampa to go to, you know, to go and then look at what happened in Asheville, North Carolina. I mean, it got hit direct, and not only did they get hit by the hurricane, but they also got hit with landslides and, and everything else. I mean, that place looks like a bomb was set off there. I mean, it does. If you go and look at the pictures of before and now, well, what I mean is if they had redirected that hurricane, I'm just saying, I'm not saying that they did. I'm just saying if they possibly did, then okay, what made that town more, I mean, why was that town, why was those lives not as important as the people? I mean, I'm not saying that the people in Tampa should have died, but I'm just saying, like, who's deciding which towns are, okay, well, this town can go. We don't need that town because it's a poor town or it's not got very many people in it or whatever. I mean, my town's only got 8,000 people in it. It's a small town. I mean,
right.
it is and I've already know that our levy is already weakening, and I know that our state, our town, well, our mayor and everything says that they don't have the money to pay to repair to repair it. So it's only a matter of time, and it has flooded before. Back in the 1920s, this whole area was completely underwater. Like, I mean, completely underwater. The river was out of its banks, and it was underwater completely. I mean, even where my apartment complex sits right now, it was completely underwater. So, what happens when somebody's altering or messing with the rain or cloud seeding or whatever they want to use, and then it causes too much rain, and then you know the rivers burst right through that damn levee. My whole daggum apartment complex will be underwater again, and I mean, and we will be, so I mean, who gets to decide what towns should go and which ones shouldn't go?
Well,
I
yeah.
mean, and I think that that's the question people need to start asking themselves. I mean, is your town less important than another town?
Well, and it also looks or appears as though it may have even been predetermined based off of that land use map that we had located by what was it, the
Mm-hmm.
National Wildlife um,
Mm-hmm.
and Forestry, and how by 2030 we looked at your town specifically and Tampa Bay, and the map shows it in colors, where it's going to be changed from high use traffic areas, no use traffic areas, and then where areas are going to be just completely blocked off to be preserved.
Mm-hmm.
So that sort of looks like they are going to be exploiting either they have some very, very good technology to predict exactly how these storms are going to hit, when, where, if, how, and all of that, or they're actually going to use the technology that they have to exploit that to their benefit and use it to mine the resources that are in those areas, which it does look like that could be what is happening. Now, I did look up for an alternative theory for that. I did look up an alternative theory, which could be that these are cyclical events that have happened during prior cataclysms. And when those mass extinction events occurred, like flash flooding or hurricanes or tsunamis or mass freezing, anything like that could have caused a mass die off, which could have contributed to the geological formation of those resources over a millennia, which could be why they are there in the first place, and therefore why the cataclysms are again choosing to target those areas for the destructive forces that we're
Mm-hmm.
seeing. Now, that's just an alternative theory that you could consider. It
Mm-hmm.
does kind of go in alignment with what Alatra believes, but also having that map to show us which particular areas aren't even going to be used by humans anymore after 2030 and especially into 2050. That does make you
Right.
wonder if certain areas are going to be targeted, or they already know they're going to be wiped out, and the rest of us are just being left in the dark. And we could be sitting
Yeah.
ducks in those areas on that map where it's just a ticking time bomb and we don't even know.
True.
Just like
That's
you're
very
saying with
true.
your town, because your town even said it was going to be redesignated as a throughway. So a way to get
Yeah.
from one populated area to another populated area. And that's it.
Mm-hmm.
which then
And if that's the case, that makes you wonder that, okay, so then
what
where's all
happens
the
to you?
people going to go?
Right.
What happens to all the people? I mean,
Hmm.
is it going to be a big tornado that wipes my town off the map, or is it going to be, the river, flooding the place, But I mean, it's obviously going to be something. If not, why would they put it there? And this was on what was the U.S. Geological survey.
Survey, I think it was. Yeah.
Wasn't that was yeah, and that was like what that was the plan for, like, wasn't that their whole thing? What year was it to be done by?
The map of the use area is
Yeah,
2030, I believe, is when
yeah.
they plan to have, so we have like 5 years. Basically, 2024 is
So
over
see,
now.
yeah.
So, and we enter this cycle fully at the end of this year,
Mm-hmm.
where the direct power of it is just going to be in magnificent in a not in a terrifying way, probably, but they could absolutely use the tools and technologies that they've been building since the 1950s to exploit what is coming to their own benefit, and then just not telling any of us about it.
Yeah. And see, and I think that's our whole point with the reason why we wanted to do this show, today, was because whether or not weather modification is being used, or whether it's not, that's not the whole, we're not here to say, now that we wanted to give you the facts about, you know the true facts about, how much energy, these man-made weapons, that people claim, on, we can post a video about climate, and there's at least two or three people that comes on there commenting, or if we're live talking about, then they do the same thing, it's, and say it's man, well, I mean, you assume and you think that it's man-made, but here we are, we're presenting these facts with you, not to mention the fact that all you can, you can go to the Creative Society. If people try to say that we don't present facts, that's bullshit. It really is, because you can go to the Creative Society's website right now. All you have to do is go to creativesociety.com. You tap on those three little lines on the top right hand corner. Then you will tap on research, and then you will tap on reports. When it takes you to the next page, you're going to click on the bottom PDF file and download the whole 92-page climate report, and it explains in great detail with the links and all the data you need, the proof that you need is all in that 92-page climate report, and it explains in great detail from very beginning all the way down to the very end what's going on, from everywhere from the ocean temperatures to the change in the seismic activity, the change in the amounts of rainfall, the change in the tornadoes and the hurricanes and things like that. So it's got everything there, and it lists that, and it does show you that this cycle really is happening. It really is. Our whole entire solar system is going through this cycle right now. It's done it before. It's done it before that. It's done it before that. I mean, and all you have to do is go and do real research. Don't go look up go to these fact checkers. Those are usually ran by the government, and they're BS. They're going to tell you what the government wants them to tell you. I mean, that's the truth.
Right.
They really are. Do real research. Go and look at, most of the stuff almost everything that's in the Creative Society, the climate report and things like that. That's public knowledge. It's not like it's some secret hidden knowledge from you. It's public knowledge, be
Yeah.
smart and really do real research,
Right. And if you don't have the time to do that, then, you could start by following people who are actively researching those topics and take in the information with an open mind and an open heart, because even if your instincts automatically tell you that this is false or fake or some sort of conspiracy or anything it says, you have to also ask yourself, what if it's not? What if it's not? Are you willing to bank the future of your children, the future of yourself, on the certainty that it's all BS? Are you that certain? You 100% certain? Because if you're not 100% certain, and I guarantee you're not, then you need to be listening to this with an open heart and an open mind, because lives are being lost. Even right this moment, lives are being lost to the climate catastrophes that are happening everywhere.
That's true. Well, I think that's a great place to end this episode. What about you?
Yeah, I agree. I agree. We definitely want to hear your questions. We want to talk about them on our next episode. You can send them to us at
Yep.
mindsunbound39@gmail.com. Also, follow us on all of our platforms: Spotify, StreamYard, YouTube, TikTok, X, Rumble, especially Rumble.
Rumble.
Everywhere you can get
Yep.
your podcast. We're not on iTunes, right? We're on
No, but
Spotify.
we
So,
do need to make one. We do need to make one
okay. But
for
we're on
sure.
Spotify, so
Yeah.
you can listen to it then too. This episode will be available probably by next weekend, right?
It'll be available on here right now after we get done. But this is
Okay.
actually the raw, uncut, uncut version. So,
Okay.
but yeah, the edited version will be up on YouTube. Probably next week or so.
Okay.
Probably
Behind the
the end of
scenes
next
here.
week. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Great. So,
So,
yeah.
yep.
Thanks to everyone.
So stay, yeah, exactly, and stay mindful and stay aware. Until next time.
Take care, everyone.